truly find gospel truth there. And the Bible, Paul says in whoever wrote Colossians, that we have this treasure of good news in earthen vessels. And so we've got a living human document. It's more like an audible book, I guess, actually, here. We're not going to read. But we trust that, what anybody's story has to offer us actually can be a revelation from God, not to put too much pressure on
I was
us.
going to say, I think you're building this up too much.
Well, I think it's well, if we haven't already experienced that from some of the people we've got to know, then I think our ears have not been open. So anyway, delighted to be here with Jon Disbro. Um, I'm going to ask you something that was not on anything we talked about, just to start with. What's your full name, and are you aware of how you came to that name?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question.
What's the story?
So my full name is Jonathan David Disbro, and I'll get to this more later. But my dad was a Lutheran pastor, and I have three brothers, and he and my mom named all of us with names out of the Bible. So my oldest brother is Mark Stephen. My second oldest brother is Timothy Paul. I'm Jonathan David. And then my youngest brother is James Philip. And they always told me that they named me Jonathan David because of the relationship between David and Jonathan, who was, I think, the son of
Saul.
Saul. Yeah. So that's how I got my name. Yeah.
They stuck with the New Testament, though.
Well, I guess
there
yeah.
were no
I didn't.
Malachi's or Methuselah's or
And yeah, no, and I didn't get into all the other combos, like what was the justification, but at least they shared that with me. That was the reason they picked us.
How old were you when you figured that out? I mean, that you
Pretty young, I think.
they
I
moved you
mean,
in early.
yeah, as a kid, I don't. My mom used to like to collect those Hummel things, and she had these little plaque things that were on the wall. I don't know if this was common, but it gave the birth date and time and and the name and everything of your child's birth. It had a little figure kind of built into it. But and it was funny because seeing that clock reminded me on this little Hummel plaque thing, there was a little clock on the wall, and it always listed the time that that child was born. But anyway, so yeah, I think my youngest brother got shortchanged because I only remember three of them. And it stopped with me. I can't remember if there was one for my brother James or not. Yeah, that's how it goes with the youngest.
Third children.
Yeah.
Well, Dave suggested, I think, has always asked, let's launch things by, tell us about your growing up. I would rather say, why don't you tell us about your early years on the assumption that none of us have ever really grown up,
Yeah.
as if that ended at some point. But
Yeah.
from birth to say end of high school, if those are maybe growing up years,
Yeah.
What's your story?
Well, that's what I intended to do. So first of all, let me just ask: Has anybody watched the Late Show with Stephen Colbert? He does something with his celebrity guests where he has that questionnaire, and it cracks me up because it's like favorite sandwich,
Yes, right.
cats or dogs, apples or oranges. The most difficult one is what do you think happens when we die? So that's a good one. But
I like the 5 words.
oh yeah, that's a good one too. And some of them are very interesting with their responses. But what's interesting is if you look at the prompts that are provided by Pastor Dave or by Brad when he got roped into this, it's like, holy crap, I can't answer that. That is way too deep. I've never even thought like that. So you're going to get a lot of hopefully interesting information, but it's going to be a lot of fluff about my life. So,
I doubt that.
so Michelle reminded me recently that our daughter Elaine says something when she's getting to know people. If anybody asks, like, what's your background or what's your family history or your ethnicity or whatever, I think we have mostly German roots, but Elaine never says that. She always says, "I'm Lutheran," which if you're not church, that might not mean a whole lot. But basically, I'm Lutheran. Um, my dad was a Lutheran pastor. My dad's dad, my grandpa was a Lutheran pastor. I have a paternal uncle who was a pastor, Lutheran pastor. I have a maternal uncle who was a Lutheran pastor. Um, Jill, our daughter, is now a Lutheran pastor, but
How did you
yeah,
skip your generation?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, well, Michelle and I went to Capital University, a Lutheran college. She was Lutheran. So like the whole life is just like steeped in the Lutheran traditions and going to church. So that's one thing to know. Oh, and chime in with questions if you want to clarify anything. So my dad went to Capital University and Capital Seminary, which was part of Capital, and then split off to Trinity, and that's back part of it. It's still called Trinity.
It's Trinity Lutheran Seminary
At
at
Capital
Capital University.
And his first call was in the Bronx, and that was in the mid 50s, I think. And then he took a call to outside of Washington, D.C., which is where I was born, Alexandria, Virginia. But I have two older brothers, and my parents apparently tried and didn't think they could get pregnant. So they adopted my two older brothers, and they were about a little less than 2 years apart. And then I think it's about 4.5 year gap, I came home. So we were still in the DC area. My dad had a small church there. And then he took a call to Detroit. And we moved to Detroit when I was, I think, a little under two. I think it was a couple of months before my second birthday. So I have no memory of Virginia. It's my birthplace, but don't really know. I do have memories of Detroit. Ironically, Michelle's from Detroit, and she grew up and attended a church that was like 15 minutes from my neighborhood and our church. And her mom was the church secretary and knew of my dad as another Lutheran local pastor, but I don't know that they ever met or anything. But that was kind of funny. Let's see. So after Detroit, my dad took a call to Sarasota, Florida. Okay. So pretty big culture shock. I was in third grade. That was in 69.
Riots in Detroit.
Oh yeah, there was riots was that 68 or 69? 68. I think.
But I'm saying you lived through that experience, then headed to Florida.
Yeah, but see, this is one thing that I realized as part of my reflection on my life is that when you're a kid, or at least my experience of being a kid, you're clueless to what's going on. And you have very different reactions to things than you do as an adult. Like I thought the riots were cool. You want to know why? Because after the riots calmed down, we drove around Detroit to go about what had happened. And I thought it was neat that there were Jeeps with army men and machine guns and stuff around. So I mean, that's how goofy it is when you're kind of a kid. No, no. But it is really interesting. And I also realized another thing, and I'm just going to interject this real quick, is I found that in looking back, my orientation was very selfish as a young person. Like, I grew up with three brothers, so it was always sort of like get what you can get, survival of the fittest kind of a thing. Attention, food, toys, whatever. But it wasn't until I matured and I'm continuing to realize that you know that egocentrism that isn't the best or healthiest or even fulfilling thing. So that was an interesting thing. We didn't talk about the riots.
No, I know.
Brought that up
Just popped
real
in.
quick. So we moved to Sarasota, and my dad took a call. I don't know if anybody's been down there, but there's a place in Sarasota called St. Armand's Key, which is a very affluent community, a little barrier island off of Sarasota. And there was a small church out there, and he took that over. And it was super cool and really different and interesting. I'm not quite sure how that impacted me for sure, but I mean, it was for a person who likes to be outside and explore things and really is interested in the natural world. It was fascinating. I mean, palm trees and fruit trees and the Gulf of Mexico and beaches. And, I rode a bus to school when we moved down there, and I had to go over two bridges to get to the mainland to get to the elementary school. So that was a cool, interesting experience. I think must have somehow planted some seeds. The plants and the animals were just fascinating. So that must have planted some seeds in my head, I think.
Yeah, it sounded isolated until you mentioned going to school in the mainland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they weren't long bridges, but it was like, I had a half-hour commute to get to school. And, actually one time the bridge got stuck up. We had to take the long way around. That was a fascinating story. I won't get into that detail, but yeah, and they decided to be efficient, so they crammed like 3 bus loads of kids into one bus because they didn't want to make all the buses take the long way. So
So much for it.
yeah, well, then we were okay, I'm getting into too much detail, but then we were overweight for a couple of the little bridges that were the long way around. So we had to all file off, walk over the bridge. They had to pull the bus over, and then we had to get back. So that was sort of interesting, but yeah. So my dad had a church there for, I don't even remember how long it exactly was, but we moved down there when I was in third grade, and I think we moved away. He changed positions with the church maybe 3 or 4 years later, so we weren't too terribly long out on the key, but had a lot of great experiences. Then he took a position with the district office of the old Eastern District of the ALC, which was interesting at the time because I don't know if the East Coast was not a hotbed of ALC Lutheranism, but the district went from Maine to Florida and had one bishop, and that was Gordon Huffman, I think.
Yep.
And so they decided to have 4 assistant bishops, divvied it up in geographic territory, and my dad took the southern one, which was still big. It was like Southern Virginia to Florida. So that tells you the geographic distribution of churches of the ALC at that time. So then we had to move out of the parsonage, moved off the key. For the first time, my family owned a house, and we were still in the area and everything, but we weren't out by the water, out on the nice little island.
Can I ask? I mean, it
Yeah.
strikes me that so much of your early life there is tied up with your dad called here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
Uh, have you embraced? How do I say? Have you embraced Christianity as an adult because of or in spite of the all the churchiness that surrounded you as a young person? He asked that having 3 kids with 2 pastors in the family.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it was because of, but I mean, obviously I had all that exposure.
Yeah.
But when my dad started working for the district office, he was no longer my pastor.
Yeah.
And then we switched churches, and I went through Sunday school and confirmation and stuff with other pastors,
Yeah.
and had terrible instruction in my mind. But and again, I think that comment I made earlier about being sort of centered on yourself as a kid, having fun, just doing stuff. I didn't pay that much attention to, I guess, Christianity and my faith and stuff like that. So
Did.
what's it?
It's
Yeah.
that culture.
Yeah. I mean, you got dragged along. I mean, I can remember my brothers and we got dragged along to church. It was like we never wanted to go early or stay late like my parents always wanted to do. I'm like, we do now. Why would we want to visit with anybody and talk with people? But but so it wasn't until I got older actually that, things started to percolate and I had, college and here and, that I really started to kind of embrace my faith and Christianity and stuff.
Well, we can get to that. Uh, what were there kind of seminal values that you now can look back on and say, in my early years, that just became part of who I was. That became part of my kind of North Star. Those principles guided me. Stuff you got from from family.
Um, as I look back, I would say that they were examples of faithful living.
Mm.
I mean, they did a lot of helping of others and connecting with others, but I wasn't really paying that much attention, I don't think. It was so yeah, I don't know how to answer that exactly.
Maybe one thing I always like to know is how did your family keep uh, holidays? I mean, Christmas or Easter or Thanksgiving. Were there certain rituals that you just knew this is going to be how we do that, and have those things carried forward in your own family life, or did you get to the point where we're never going to do it that way?
Michelle, what was your answer to that question when we talked about
Yeah.
it? Your answer was
Well,
we go to church.
Right.
um so yeah, I don't really know how to answer that.
I mean, like, were you Christmas presents on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning?
Oh, that kind of stuff.
That kind of
So it was funny back
Did you
then.
eat turkey or did you eat ham?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this was common across a lot of congregations at the time, but in my dad's churches, they always had Christmas Day worship.
Oh,
So, I mean, we went to church Christmas Eve and we went to church on Christmas Day.
and we do
And,
that now.
and usually in my growing up family, we didn't open gifts until after church on Christmas Day. It wasn't like you got to get up and start tearing into things or open them the night before or after church. Yeah. So, um, yeah, no, it was just the traditional stuff. My mom would always make a big feast meal of some kind, and the church, come home. The interesting thing was because we moved around so much, we pretty much always lived apart from relatives and family. So, I mean, it was oftentimes just us on holidays. So, same for you. Yeah.
sure.
I mean, occasionally somebody would come down and visit us for the Christmas holiday because they were on Christmas break or something. Of course, once we moved to Florida, we were very popular, especially when we lived out on St. Armand's Key. I mean, you could pretty much just get to the beach in about 2 minutes.
Do you have an especially memorable birthday from those first
Yeah,
15,
okay.
18
I'll
years?
tell you a good story. Michelle knows this one, but in Detroit, my mom was, when I look back on it as a parent, I think she was sly. She was good at pulling the wool over her eyes. I think, I forget whether I was 6 or 7, but she asked me if I could have a birthday cake, what kind would I like? So in my creative mind, I'm like, ooh, I'd like chocolate cake with orange frosting and green writing. I mean, I had some kind of really elaborate, detailed stuff. And see the shotgun. But anyway, so she takes me, sort of promotes it as let's go to the bakery and just see. This is a couple of days later. I forgot she even asked me that. Let's see what kind of cake they have. I don't want to make a cake for your birthday. So we go down there and we go, and in the front window is that cake. I'm like, look at them. I made a big deal out of it. And then it was like, wait a minute. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized, oh, she pulled the wool over my it was great. But so that and some of those young birthday parties, I can remember inviting my school friends, and of course my younger brother's 3.5 years older than me, has to come to the party too and be a nuisance. I just remember having a birthday party and having him be the nuisance. And oh, here's another example of my egocentrism. I didn't understand why the birthday boy didn't win the prizes.
Yeah.
I mean, what? The birthday boy. So I remember being upset about that. But
Now, you just had a birthday, it's what, a week or so ago, right?
yeah.
Are you wondering why you didn't win the lottery when you bought that house?
Yeah.
Uh,
So real quick, let me make one other comment about my moving around. So I was calculating this the other day, and it wasn't so much Detroit, I went to parochial school. Florida, I went to public schools. But the public schools in Florida probably, I'm assuming, haven't gotten much better, but they weren't that good, at least in my parents' eyes. So my mom was always sort of a hands-on parent with making sure that I got good teachers and was put in good classrooms and stuff like that. But I was in 6 different schools when I figure that we moved in the school year. I was in 6 different school buildings in 5 years, which was, a lot of moving around. But
Tell them the culture shock to going to Florida school.
yeah, Florida schools, well, they were desegregated, which sounds funny because it's the South versus North, but parochial school in Detroit was mostly white. And, that had its own flavor to it. But going down there, whole mixture of kids and races. And I just remember being in the boys' room when I first got down there. And they're using all these words that I had never heard before in parochial school. Well, they were all curse words. Like, what does that mean? But of course, I slowly started to figure it out. I knew enough to know that these aren't words that you use out in the general public. Anyway, that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, school was fine in Florida.
so you graduated high school, I assume, at some point.
Yeah.
And what was the decision process like at that point? Or was there a decision, or was just capital sort of your fate?
Well,
I think you should tell them about your high school though, too,
Oh.
because that was a different experience to me compared to my experience.
so at that time, the school district was the county, and the county decided that instead of having like programs in each school building that were accelerated, they would make one school and like bring all the kids from the district that tested as, talented or whatever that meant. So in 7th grade, I started at that school, and that brought kids from all over the district, but it separated you from the other regular high schools that had all the sports like football and all that stuff. So and a lot of the extracurriculars too. So if you wanted to participate in any of that stuff, you were allowed to do that at whatever would have been your normal, geographic school, but you were kind of on your own to get there and stuff. And yeah, it was a weird cultural thing, but it was good academically. So
But you only had 40 kids in your class. I mean, I graduated when it was
40
500.
some kids in my graduating class, and most of the graduating class were probably over 500 at that time.
Did you do some extracurricular stuff that you had to kind of put yourself out there for?
Not really. I did younger. I played a little bit of youth sports, but never had great experiences. But I will say I went over to the local high school for a few types of classes that weren't offered where I was at. And one of them that I really enjoyed, you can probably imagine this, because I was always into like science and stuff, and had some really interesting science teachers in high school. But I took a marine biology, a couple of sections of marine biology, and the local high school had a really good program with that. They even had, shortly before I got into high school, a group of high schoolers and teachers built a boat that they called the floating classroom. And it was kept at the local marina, and they would take that out and do experiments and take adult groups out to teach them more about the marine environment and stuff. That was fascinating. I love that stuff. Still to this day, I love all things marine, and I grew up liking to fish because of where we live, and used to fish with my friends and my relatives all the time. Um, but so that was kind of unique. But now I didn't really get that heavy into the extracurriculars.
I'm just showing pictures that might go with what you're saying, just so you know.
oh yeah.
Oh,
So that's my Columbus uncle and cousin coming down one Christmas, and we all like to fish, so we all went fishing, and
Yeah.
we hit the mother lode of apparently a school of fish that day. We were fishing off a bridge out connecting a couple of the keys.
Second.
But that's one of those events in family lore that gets brought up occasionally. You know, I mean, there must have been 50 fish there probably. And of course, I don't know how exactly, but I got known to be the family fish cleaner. So I filleted them all probably while everybody stood around and watched and goofed around. But well, let's see.
well, when you went to college, did you know what this would have been 80s?
Yeah, so one other detail, and then we'll move into college. So when I was, I think I was a sophomore that year, but I was 15 in 77, and my dad died unexpectedly. So he had had a couple of things with my parents in health. He had had a heart attack when I was a little bit younger, and I remember him having to take he was still at St. Armands Key Lutheran Church as the pastor, and he had to take a period of time off before he recovered, you know, getting through that. And then when he was working for the district office, he used to travel a lot on the weekends to preach at other churches in the district or to meet with pastors and stuff. And on one of those trips, he had another heart attack and died. And then also when I was a young kid, again, my selfishness coming out. One summer, I think I was probably still in elementary school. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer and had to have a radical mastectomy. And when the kids, my brothers and I got told, my first thought was, because my dad said we're going to have to cancel our vacation. And I'm like, what? We have to cancel the vacation? Can't she like
Suck it up.
postpone the surgery, or can we shift the trip? I mean, it was going to be a big RV trip out west, you know, like the mother lode of all vacations, and it just got canceled. Man, yeah, what a dummy I was. It was hard, but and so that's 77. We graduated in 79. So I'm looking at where I'm going to go to college, and like, am I going to go to a Florida school like Florida State? Surprisingly, I even looked at Michigan State because at the time I was thinking, you know, I like science, I like biology. They're a really good forestry school. And I thought, "Oh, that could be interesting." So I visited those two campuses. And then, you know, I have relatives. I didn't say that, but I'll get to that point. I have relatives here in Columbus because my mom was born and raised here in Columbus. And my relatives went to Capital. So I thought, oh, I should look at Capital. Well, that sort of appealed to me because I was used to my little small high school class, my little small high school. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. Basically, I wanted to get out of Florida, surprisingly, because I wanted a change. I wanted to experience seasons again, you know, and just, you know, have my own unique experience instead of just staying in the routine of, you know, Florida. So that's kind of what took me to Capital, and Capital was a good fit. Um, made I don't know if everybody else has felt this way about college, but you go away thinking this is my opportunity to like start fresh, to be who I want to be, make the friends I want to make, not the ones I've had for the last, you know, 6, 7 years through school. And yeah, it was good. Um, and I think with chapel at Capital, that's where I started, you know, getting reconnected with church or connected in a different way, a way that was because I wanted to go and participate and stuff. So that was good.
Was Dean Piper the campus pastor at that point?
No, it was Chuck Mayer.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Until you major.
I was a biology major.
yeah.
Not sure why in terms of like future career goals or anything, but as I've said, I liked biology. So, I mean, a lot of the kids I was at CAP with in the sciences went on to medicine and physical therapy and research and stuff like that. And, I just did it because that sounds like a fun thing to study. In retrospect, if knew I was going to marry a teacher, I think science education would have been a good thing, but that I wasn't going to change course at that point. So anyway, let's see, what else was I going to tell you? So I mentioned I have roots to Central Ohio. My grandparents still lived here when I came to college. My aunt and uncle, my mom's sister, lived here with my two cousins. My dad had Central Ohio roots, although I'm not sure exactly what they were, but I can go to my grandparents are at a cemetery in Waldo, and there's a whole like little knoll of Disbro graves in the big cemetery in Delaware. So there must have been some serious Delaware roots to the Disbro ancestors. But the interesting thing with my maternal grandfather, my mom's dad, he grew up in Grove City on a farm. His family name was Veller, and there's a Veller Avenue and a Veller Circle in the heart of Grove City over there, where that I think probably was part of their old farm, before it got developed and stuff. But my grandpa was a jeweler and a watchmaker, repairer, and had a store on High Street in the Short North. So if you're familiar, just on the north side of the Cap, there's a building called the Yukon Building. It's like a 3-story brick building. You can see it from 670. And his jewelry store was in the first level of that, in the middle.
Store now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like today. It's that space is a UPS drop-off thing. But yeah, he had quite a good business, I think, but in the late 50s sometime, he was robbed at gunpoint and he did not carry insurance. And all of his stock got wiped out and basically decimated his business. And at that point, he retired. But I mean, he was pretty old at that point. But yeah, so my grandparents lived here. Their house that I used to visit as a small child is not too far from where we live now. And the house we live in was my grandparents, and my cousin bought it from them when they went into Lutheran Senior City, and I bought it from my cousin. So they moved in the house we live in 69 and probably moved out about 81ish. And we moved in 87.
Yeah, it's been there ever since.
So we've lived there. So I have, Columbus roots, but I also was born in Virginia, lived in Detroit, lived in Florida, and then found my way back here to Columbus.
How did you get connected with Redeemer?
So
Is there a story there?
yeah, kind of well, for sure, after we got married in December of 84, we were looking to join a Lutheran church.
We had started going before that.
No, we had started going before that, but we were looking to actually, pick one and join. And we were living in Mayfair Apartments on James and Main kind of, and didn't want to go to Christ because Christ was the college church. So at Capitol, if you didn't go to the campus ministry, you usually walked across the street to Christ. And that was a lot more like your home church, probably, at home. Maybe more traditional and a big stone church or whatever. But yeah, so we didn't want to go to Christ, although a lot of our friends from Capitol did. And we tried here and we really, really liked it. Pastor Kelly was super great to us. Jenny Presta and the Kellys and Michelle and I had a little Bible study that we did in each other's homes. We just rotated around and stuff. And yeah, it was close. So, and then when we moved into the house we're in now, it's really only about a 15-minute ride. You hop on the freeway. Compared to a lot of you commuters, we're not going very far. So.
And we chose, I don't know if that was the time you want to say why we chose to keep going here with the girls.
Well, we didn't want to switch to UALC, Upper Arlington Lutheran Church, and we just felt like this I mean, we didn't want to leave Redeemer. I mean, what do you think was the
My
reason?
point was that Arlington had a different vibe. Everybody had everything and didn't think anything
Well, for
of
sure,
it.
for sure.
And I didn't want my girls, I wanted my girls to be a little more aware of the life. And the kids they came through church with had all different experiences, and it wasn't the Arlington experience.
Well, also by that time we had called Al and really bonded with Pastor Al and just loved the, I thought it was interesting this morning. Did anybody pick up on the words of that first hymn, ask the complicated questions? That's our adult forums to a T, man. And that's what's been so good about being a part of Redeemer. And I think for our kids too, is just not being afraid to ask questions that you might not be able to ask in other places.
Well, that one of Dave's prompts, and I'm really interested in this in terms of faith life. I think one of the things I suggested to you was, is there something you've had to unlearn in your adult life about faith, or relearn maybe?
No, I would say just learn.
Okay.
Like I said, my instruction as a younger person was terrible, and I'm not sure I knew much.
Okay.
I mean, I knew the routines, the liturgy,
Yeah.
going through the motions and stuff, but I don't think it was until I think, and I can't say I learned a lot at CAP, but I began to feel like you could ask questions and think about things differently while I was at CAP. Some of those uh, religion professors like to really stretch the boundaries a little bit and stuff. So, that was there. But it wasn't until I think here that I realized that, well, the one thing, Al had a way of introducing things that, kind of got you thinking, if you might not have gone there before. But the other thing was the adult forum is and was filled with people who had all these different ideas and attitudes, and they weren't afraid to make comments or ask questions. And it was almost like you were presented with this smorgasbord of different ideas, and you could sort of like, ooh, that really resonates with me. I like that. I have to remember that. And you sort of tuck that away. It's too bad Michelle Clements isn't here, because she and I seem to like kind of gravitate to the same sort of like ideas about atonement theory and different stuff. But um, yeah.
So I remember, I think it was at a recent Brewing Faith, you raised the question. So since you asked it, I'm going to ask you, why do you go to church?
We can't answer that because that's Tuesday night talk.
Oh, that's
Tuesday night talk.
Yeah, all right, skip that then.
Yeah.
Uh,
Nice pivot, John.
Yeah, I know. That got me out of.
well, all right, so
Have I answered it? No, but luckily Rich shared some really good thoughts that are going to be great at driving the discussion.
where is Brewing Faith this week?
It's out in Reynoldsburg at the East Side Brewing Company.
I'm sorry, I can't be there. Well, we always want to make sure Bill's question gets on the table here. And it's been so good. Dave has even incorporated it here. I've got this wrong though. Let me know that what, when you look at all the world stuff that's going, what is there something that you wish you understood that, or that you still flummoxed by?
There's just so much. It's
Forced choice.
completely befuddling.
Pick
Like,
one.
oh gosh. I don't know. It's kind of like I'm a person who is a glass half full. I'm a person who doesn't feel like I can judge people. Just because, like, who am I to judge what's appropriate for you? I wouldn't want to be judged. So why would I judge others? I don't understand why so many people in the world, have this black and white attitude that what you're doing is wrong and what I'm doing is right. And I just don't get what drives all the divides in the world, with whether it's politics or religion or just it's so much nicer to get along and to learn about the other people. And when you start doing that, what was I was listening to or watching recently where it was along those lines, like if you just talk to people, you learn that they may be completely on the surface opposite you, but there's so much in common. So I guess I'd like to know what drives that. Is it a insecurity in people? Is it I don't know what makes somebody have that need to judge other people and drive division in the world.
I wonder if is part of the mystery um, why you are not still the birthday boy who thinks you ought to get the prizes on your birthday. You matured. Apparently, some people don't follow the path that you were able to follow. I mean, but why is that?
I don't know. Do they not get exposed to a lot of alternatives? Like, have I just been lucky in the environments that I've found myself in with Capital and with Redeemer and I don't know.
I'd love to jump in here too, because I think you need to share a little bit of your life history. What made you be so independent and independent in your thinking? But I think that is because of what you experienced growing through life and the fact that you are this scientific mind, excuse me, that always likes to process and think through things. But I think a lot of it's that independence you had growing up because you had a much more different life experience than I did.
Well, I didn't mention, yeah, I don't know. Well, than you did, but you had like the Ozzy and Harriet idyllic little thing. But yeah, I did not. Yeah, I didn't mention my older brothers, my adopted older brothers. They were challenging for my parents. They had lots of problems, substance abuse problems. My one brother ran away at one point. So there was a lot of, and when I look back on that time as a kid again, I was clueless. I was in my own little bubble, just making sure that my needs were met. But man, my parents went through hell, I think, with my older brothers, and they're both deceased now. Really, the only family member I have left is my younger brother. Um, so that was interesting. My dad dying when I was 15 was a little bit problematic, but my mom did a great job, keeping the household together and stuff. I probably didn't give her enough support and encouragement, but
Did you go on Friday nights to rehab with the family? Like that's not a normal, like how I grew up playing with my friends,
yeah. But yeah, I don't know if that's what made me independent. Um, I don't know. Could be. Actually, in college, I worked summer jobs. The first year after freshman year, I went back to Florida and lived at home and worked a variety of odd jobs, gas station attendant, lawn mowing, janitorial stuff, just to make money. But after that, I never went back. And I stayed up here actually and worked on golf courses, doing maintenance on golf courses and stuff, and worked with my cousins. Actually, they were doing the same sort of thing, and lived with my aunt and uncle. But I don't know. Where were we?
Question.
Yeah.
Your mom had breast cancer.
Yeah.
Younger than 15.
Elementary school.
Okay.
Yeah. And back then it was a radical mastectomy, and I can remember.
So you were in college?
Actually, after we got married, we were living in the apartment up here. Yeah, Al was our pastor, and my mom it metastasized, and she,
Sure, that-
yeah, it went into her bone and her brain, and it was
So
quickly.
she was.
And in fact,
for
she
quite a while.
it metastasized, and she was fighting it when we got married in
Mhm.
December of '84. She got to the wedding in Detroit, but she wasn't doing great. And then it was fall of '86 that she finally passed.
So you've had her and so you were a young adult.
Yeah, Michelle got to meet her, thankfully.
Okay. And then one other question, you have an aunt in Burlington that you do a lot,
Yeah, that's my mom's younger sister.
that's what I wondered,
Mhm.
it was mom or dad's family.
Yeah, I had another aunt that was older than my mom from that family. That was my mom's half sister. I love family history. I haven't really intentionally dived into it. I just know the family stories that I've heard, and I captured it all up here. But the grandpa that grew up in Grove City, he had like 11 siblings. They grew up on a farm. He married in the early 1900s, and his first wife had a child shortly before the pandemic flu epidemic, hit. And ultimately, she died of that. And that child lived. That was my older aunt, my mom's half sister, because my grandpa eventually remarried and had two more kids. But it was fascinating because as a young bachelor at that time in the 1920s or whatever, you didn't just raise a kid on your own. So the spinster siblings all convinced him that they should, have her in their household. And when he remarried, they convinced him that, oh, just keep her here and keep that continuity. He never kind of like brought her back into his own household. So that was always an interesting little family dynamic there. And it was her husband who was another Lutheran pastor. But, yeah, there's a lot of. So we're getting close. What is the time?
Do you
12:15.
want to share any pictures real quick?
Oh yeah. So
Because this is so you, I
yeah,
guess.
so I'm the little guy in front of my mom, and I don't know if you can see, but I have my slingshot tucked into my belt, and I have a couple of sticky, rubbery spider toys stuck to my shirt. So I traveled with my stuff.
And I'll show a couple other ones that are very you. Okay, so then this is another one. You can point this out.
So I'm a young kid. That was when we first moved to Detroit. I was probably only 4 or something like that. But again, I have my 6-shooter in my left hand, my lollipop in my right hand, and my cowboy hat. Now I just walk around with garden tools in my pocket.
That's the last pic there.
Yeah, and my hat on. Yeah.
So, you guys, how old? And, oops, is it going up?
And don't click it there, and
Was this the church picture? No.
No.
Oh, there's some.
Check it.
Oh yeah. So that was behind our Detroit house. So that had to be maybe a year before we moved away from Detroit, because that's my youngest brother, and he's 3.5 years younger than me. He was born in '65. But my grandpa, the one here from Columbus, he had a just so you know, the house that they lived in before the house we live in, he had a massive garden in the backyard and grew just about everything you can think of, including his own grapes that he made his own wine from, and fruit trees and stuff. So I think I got his genes, but he helped me plant that garden. I had corn, tomatoes, I think carrots.
Lettuce down there, maybe.
Is that lettuce, you think,
Yeah,
in the
no
lower
Swiss
part?
chard back then.
No. But I think I saw some note on the back of one of those pictures, and maybe that picture. My mom wrote, "We got 60 tomatoes off of those plants," or something like that. And that was a dinky little circular bed, like some of these pool beds in a way. And my grandpa had me plant these like miniature varieties. So the corn never got full length. It only got about 6 inches, and the carrots were little and stuff. And I don't know, it sort of hooked me. So that was fun.
did you
Um,
have a garden each year after that?
No, not each year, but then we moved to my parents always planted flowers and enjoyed like the art and landscaping. And when we moved to Florida, that got supercharged because, you know, my mom had a whole big orchid collection, which was gorgeous. And, you know, we had all kinds of stuff in our yards, citrus, banana tree when we first moved down there. You know, just it was pretty amazing. Yeah. Um, so yeah, that might be where I got my, well, and I was always interested in science and stuff. I had friends even in high school who were into that stuff. Well, sometimes growing their own weed, but you know, all kinds of botany. So just
Oh, good question.
well, you know, I came out of college with a biology degree and thought, I really don't want to go to any kind of grad school or go into medicine. So I actually had an aunt that worked at Nationwide for a long career, um, kind of more an administrative support, but and I thought, well, a hospital could be an interesting place to work as a person that likes science and stuff. And I just applied and started working in patient accounts and was ended up being there 41 years. For me, I never had any like major career goals. It wasn't like I had an idea of what I wanted to do. It's just like I wanted to be involved with an organization that I could feel good about and I thought had a good mission. And, you know, I could support my family. And actually, once Michelle and I got together, I was like, I need to stay in Columbus. She's teaching in Gahanna. So, you know, it was just seemed like a good place to work. And it was. So that worked out. Real quick before we go. So here's my words of wisdom. I was thinking about this. Maybe this came to me when I was shaving this morning. Does anybody else have those things like weird stuff pops into your head? Like I can remember in my work life, if I was dealing with an issue, I did system support for most of my life at computer system support. If there was an issue that I was dealing with in terms of the system and how I need to reconfigure things, for some reason, all the best ideas would pop into my head when I was in the shower. Like, I don't know if that means my mind is free and just so anyway. Well, true, true. So I think some of these came to me while I was shaving this morning, but these are the things that I think I've started to learn for myself in my life, and I'm probably going to continue to learn. But so change is a constant, so get comfortable with accepting that. I used to work hard to keep everything the same. Then I realized you can't do that. And actually, it's more interesting if it doesn't. You know, that's another mystery to me is why do we always fight so hard for security and constancy? I'm not sure. Um, I've learned that relationships and community are incredibly important and valuable. I think the Redeemer community has become super important to us and me. But you know, I used to think things were important, experiences were important, and I guess I shortchanged relationships. And now I think, man, family for sure, but you know, all sorts of relationships are super important. Um, I've discovered that I don't want to put on airs. I'm very comfortable with my authentic self. So if I had to tell people, you know, what is a character trait that you really hold, I think we've done that in this class before, you know, integrity. Well, that's a good one, but authenticity to me is, and you know, I just God loves us for who we are. He made us. Why do I have to be anything different for anybody? And Rich knows I used to say this more than I do now, but things are not black and white. Everything's gray. So,
Great.
you know,
You say that.
struggle with it a little bit, figure it out, you know, and see where you land. But, you know, people are going to land in different places, but embrace the gray.
Question. With your biology background and Nationwide, the whole children's hospital, everything, what's your idea of God?
Well, it's interesting you asked that because we invited one of my former professors from Capitol, probably 30 years ago, to our Redeemer Adult Forum to talk on that. She was an organic chemistry professor, and she was speaking about the perceived conflict of science and God and religion. Her message and what I've always felt is that there is no conflict. There's science illuminates mystery, and religion doesn't have all the answers for everything. There's just a ton of mystery in religion. I have no problem believing that there's a creator, but I have no problem believing that things are evolving and changing constantly, and that they might not have been created in the exact state that we see things now. I really don't see uh, I think it's an artificial conflict in my mind that people try to force on us. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I don't want it to be about me. I just wanted to know what you thought about it.
Yeah. Well, I don't really have a conflict with the idea of being a person of faith and a believer in God and a creator. But I think we're all God's always creating. Um, yeah, I just did you have something?
We've talked in this form about what the creed means and so forth. I was just thinking of this morning. So when you say the first words of the Apostles' Creed, maybe this is part of what Bill's asking. You say, "I believe in God."
Yeah.
Okay, hard stop right there. What is that? What does that word mean? What are you? Who are you? What are you actually believing in when you say, "I believe in God"? It cut off the rest of that first article,
Yeah.
Almighty Creator, but that's somebody else's words. What's John's words that come after "I believe in God"? Is that sort of
Exactly.
yeah? Okay,
Well,
because I want to write this down.
yeah, right. Well, I believe in God, but it incorporates all these other things. So I believe in a creator.
Put your hands with.
I believe in him. I'm sure it gets agitated with me because I'm always putting my hands around my mouth. And her hearing's getting worse, so she can't hear me unless I crisply enunciate. um, yeah, I don't have the answer to that. That'd be a great growing faith question.
It would be.
I believe in God, but
If you change the word, if you take the word belief away in terms of just what do I intellectually think about God, but in the biblical sense, what do you trust? I mean, I think that's what the creed means. This is the entity that I trust more than anything else. And we say, I trust whatever we think God is. I trust what we think God revealed in Jesus, and I trust this spirit that is different from a lot of spirits that run around that are evil and whatever. What do you most trust?
what do I most trust? That that I was created and that uh, God loves me and others for exactly who we are. That's what I most trust. Um, I would say that's like the bedrock. I also I don't really know where the rationale for this, but this idea that God knows us before we're born, throughout our life and after our death, that continuum knowing us is kind of interesting and comforting to me. I like that concept that, um, I'm in relationship with God throughout the whole spectrum. I, I've shared sometimes I have all kinds of crazy ideas, like I don't believe in heaven, don't believe necessarily in afterlife, but I do believe that I'm forgiven and that I'm loved exactly who I am. And that's like to me the firm foundation, I guess, but I call it the bedrock.
Um, think we're probably about
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
is there any last burning issue that somebody wants to make sure?
Swiss chard. Nobody asked about Swiss chard. Actually, I don't really know how I got hooked on that, although I do have a memory
It's good for good.
as a kid of my aunt, the one that was my mom's half sister. I remember visiting them as a kid, and she was showing me her garden, and I was like, "What's that?" And she was like, "Swiss chard," and that stuck in my head. But and then I when we started these gardens here, I think I just by chance maybe planted some Swiss chard, and I'm like, darn, this is the greatest vegetable. I mean,
What
it,
handles the heat?
it grows through the whole season. It does really well. It produces a ton. It's super nutritious and it's pretty if you get the right variety. It's the colored ones.
Can you eat it raw or cooked?
Yeah, it's like versatile. It's like you gotta embrace Swiss chard.
In chart we trust.
Since you've recently retired, what's on your bucket list?
Oh yeah, we didn't get there yet. So I retired on April 1st, believe it or not. And I had to tell everybody, no kidding. When I first was it?
Yeah.
Um, I'm surprised at how I think I would say easy of a transition it was. And I I mean, I stepped away and I haven't thought one iota about what I left behind and people and job and work and all that stuff. I think that's just a sign that I was that ready to go and I needed to go. But the other thing is, when the pandemic hit, they moved us all home, which we thought was temporary, and then it became permanent. So I've worked permanently at home, from probably March of 2020 till I retired. So and personnel changed. I wasn't as connected to the replacements because we were all remote. They moved me out of my old department, so those connections were severed. So what's on my bucket list is I tell people I don't have any kind of honey-do list or a bucket list per se. But I decided I have 5 areas that I want to make sure that I'm participating in things. So like exercise, enrichment, I would say it'd be like reading and going to cultural things and maybe classes or, seminars, travel. What's the other one? Service. So like the food pantry and, the garden and things like that. And what's the other one?
Did you write it down? Yeah, I don't
Oh, I did
know.
somewhere.
Improving your memory? No.
Yeah, memory. Oh, recreation, golfing and fishing and bicycling and things like that. Which is they all cross over. Exercise is recreation. Service can be exercise. Oh yeah, poker. I forgot about poker. But so I don't have a bucket list per se. Like I want to visit, Arches National Park, although I do. But I just want to make sure that I'm not shortchanging any of those areas that I really enjoy. And I super enjoy being outside, just observing simple things like flowers and sunsets and clouds and stuff. Even as a kid, I loved that. Um, so yeah,
Well,
thank you.
Thank you
Yeah.
for letting us
No.
read your story.
Let me know if you. So, as Colbert would say, I don't think this is true. You're now known. Apples or oranges?